Wow. Thank you all so much for the beginning of the service with the meditation and the reading and the music. And Alora, I'm glad you were able to join us. I know you had some tech problems to get connected. And so here we are, meeting on Zoom. Our title today is The Gift of Quarantine, No Escape from Oneself. And I guess there's a lot of play on words in that title by itself. One self. We are one self. And certainly this global epidemic has shown us that we are not separate from all the other beings sharing this world with us. And I believe maybe this has been the first time where the whole globe has been affected by a common virus, all at the same time, pretty much. So the gift of quarantine and no escape from recognizing that we're all one. Also, no escape from that small self that we've spent our lifetimes creating, which, sometimes doesn't always function in the highest manner. And that this quarantine, this being by oneself, is forcing us to look at that. Look at, who am I? How have I defined who I am, and how have I been living from my personality self, from my roles, from my habits? And so this quarantine has, in a sense, been an imposed slowing down for all of us, and an opportunity. I mean, that's certainly what we've been teaching all along. Let's, sit with yourself and go within. It's been a forced relinquishment of our attachments to habitual patterns, and without any refuge from our distractions. All those outward doings that we've been spending our life with often serve as distractions, and that's been forced on us to relinquish a great deal of that. And it's an opportunity to examine what's important in our lives and to be able to make new choices. Now, in the context of this spiritual community, this might sound like we've just signed up for a week-long silent meditation, and where we choose to go into silence and look within and relinquish the worldly attachments and examine what our purpose is. But in this case, none of us signed up for this. Certainly didn't sign up to do 4 months, 5 months plus, who knows how much longer that we may be facing this. So we didn't sign up for this, and never imagined that in 2020, we'd be spending months sheltered in place in an effort to mitigate the spread of a highly contagious coronavirus. I never even knew shelter in place was a phrase before this. Maybe you haven't either. Maybe it's new, I don't know. And I certainly never expected the word mitigate to be a regular part of my vocabulary. But here we are. Now, some people may say, nothing good has come from this. What are you talking about? Gifts. How can you say that there's a gift in this? And certainly this isn't to minimize the great effects that this coronavirus has had on the lives of so many. We know the statistics, the numbers are appalling as to how many have been sickened and how many have died around the world from this particular virus. And so I'm not intending to dismiss the great effects, the great harshness that has come upon many I personally feel really lucky because of my situation in life right now. I'm still able to work for the center, and otherwise I was semi-retired and have enough income that it, I could get by if even this had stopped. And so, I feel maybe personally, maybe a little guilty that it hasn't affected me like it has many. I know people with young families are dealing with, how do my children get their education? How do I stay at home with these children all day, every day, without a break? Many of us are very grieved not to be able to see our families, not to see our grandchildren, our children, if they live far away, not to see our parents who maybe are elderly, and it's too much of a risk to be in contact with them. So certainly there's great hardship. And so the message today, though, is for us to examine how this pandemic and the consequent response to it has impacted our spiritual life, and to question if we're taking this experience as an opportunity to deepen our commitment to live our life with a stronger realization that the world of form will never provide stability and is not where our safety lies. This pandemic has certainly revealed broken systems, and it's magnified the inequalities in our world. And it's shown us where we have mistakenly put our faith, perhaps, in the past. And so the stay-at-home orders have challenged us to examine who we think we are and what we have depended upon for our happiness up until this time. So we've been unable to gather, as I mentioned before, unable to participate in our jobs, engage in our routines. And probably led to grief, fear, loneliness, sadness, anger, frustration, as we've been navigating the times. And as the months go on, it changes. I remember a great deal of humor out on Facebook at first, kind of, the old toilet paper scene with Lucille Ball and, or no, it wasn't Lucille Ball, it was that other comedian. I can't think of her name right now. But anyway, there was a lot of tongue-in-cheek stuff, and that's sort of morphed into a lot more negativity from what I've been viewing. And the anger is more apparent, and the frustration. So we're navigating through this, and it's changing. And, as Janet mentioned earlier, we're certainly very grateful that in this community, we've been able to maintain a connection, thank goodness for Zoom and Facebook and the technology. And when that technology doesn't work, like when Alora's computer doesn't work right, some things we still can't control, can we? But overall, we've been able to connect, and there's been an amazing array of teachings and meditations and yoga and all kinds of things offered directly from Interfaith and through our community members on their own. And, sometimes it actually is a little overwhelming, like, how many Zoom meetings can I do in one day? But it certainly allowed us to stay connected, and that's been a real gift. And for me personally, those social hours have been wonderful, and I encourage you, if you aren't checking in on those, to join us. So far, there's 9 to 12 people, and we stay in one group, and we check in on one another, and we find out how we're all coping with this time. And certainly, if more people joined, we could break into smaller groups and still have an intimate conversation. So I encourage you to do that, and that certainly has been helping us stay connected. And so what's happening is we're engaging in a lot of things, and these are the gifts. We are engaging in a lot of things that we'd wished we'd had more time to do in the past. We've been taking walks every day. I mean, thank goodness it wasn't some nuclear fallout and preventing us from going outside. We've been able to go outside and take walks and be in nature and watch the birds and listen to the birds, and that's been wonderful. And in other physical activities, bike riding and going to the lakes now these days. So we've been able to be in nature a lot more. We've been reading perhaps more, listening to music. I know Rob is a great music aficionado, and he's been going through his great collection of all kinds of things that he tells about us on social groups. Maybe we've been meditating more through either the Zoom meetings or through our own personal practice. Doing home projects, gardening, cooking more. I'm eating far less restaurant food. I think we've had restaurant food maybe 3 times through carryout, and that's been good. Maybe more time to reflect and more time to realize what is important in my life. We're slowing down. And then another thing that I've been spending a lot of time, and I think others have told me they have too, cleaning up the house and sorting through and organizing. I've been looking at pictures and calling the ones that are of people I never knew, distant relatives, grandchildren or whatever, who I don't even know who they are. And anyway, just going through the old files. And honestly, I've had collected things from my children's infancy, and I've culled through that and got it down to 1 box each of stuff that I'm saving for them so they can look back on their childhood and have good remembrances. And another offshoot of what happens with that is, for me, I've touched on a great deal of sadness for the past. Sadness about, people who are no longer here. Events that I wish had turned out differently. So it's kind of in our face. If any of the rest of you are doing that, you know what I mean. It's really life in review in many ways. And, the other thing that's happening because we're sheltered in place, if we happen to be sheltered in place with our partner, this is good and bad. There seems to be an occasion sometimes for a little more snippiness and a little more flares of anger, perhaps, that can happen in our very close relationships. Because there's also no escape there. We can't just take off and go shopping or take off and go visit somebody else. We're right there at home, up close and personal with our beloved. And so I have a little offshoot here about the anatomy of an argument. So some stupid thing arises, some statement. Yes, I look back on the various little things that happened in my life in recent months. I can't even remember what the argument was about, but something triggers us, and then we're off and running. So conflict arises. There's no escape, no coping mechanism. Like I said, you can't go out shopping. So we're forced to look at it, to be with it, to look at what our role is in creating that. Look at what triggered it. So the conflict is unpleasant and might cause some heartache and gut-wrenching angst, I wrote down. Our thoughts could range, at least at the beginning, from sadness to plots of revenge, imaginings of loss, fear, betrayal, self-pity, loneliness, emptiness. bottom line is we feel separate from that beloved one that we're sharing our life with. We might see ourselves as the victim. And so the way out is to stay with it, to be with it, to have courage. We can't go anywhere else anyway. And we ask, what do we want? Do we want conflict? Do we want to be right? Do we want this to continue? Or do we want to return to love? And so the arguments can be a great catalyst for miracles, if we're willing to take that next step and acknowledge that we had a part in this. That old saying, it takes two to tango, is quite true. And that there are no winners in war. There are no winners. And so when we find ourselves taking that bait to jump into a little argument, to demand that we're right, it's time to say, wait a minute, stop. Now, of course, you might have to go through that, the crying and the blaming and the seeking revenge scenario for a few minutes. But I hope we can come back to remembering this is not what I want, and this is not what's real. And so instead, we're going to go back and, as I said, just look inside. And for me, I use, of course, the miracles terminology a lot. Ask, Holy Spirit, how can I see this differently? How can I see the error that was made? Did I choose to see myself as right? Did I choose to see myself as weak? And did I choose to join the dream that my brother is having? And lose my mind and go down that rabbit hole? Or did I choose, or can I choose to remember the dream of love, remember the oneness, remember, the love that stands behind all of that? I remind myself, I can only change my own thoughts. I can't change anyone else's thoughts. And if I'm in the presence of someone who I think I'm blaming for this argument, if I choose to see that that's not the person that's doing that, it's the person having a bad dream that's doing that. And if I join in that bad dream, hell is coming. If I remember to look on that one with love, to see the truth, that that person is the Holy Son of God, then I'm not joining the bad dream, and I'm not making it worse. I'm, in fact, experiencing a miracle of forgiveness and joining and peace. And so, seeing how I've had that experience a few times in the last few months, I wanted to pass on those tips to you. And I imagine I'm not the only one who's found myself in little, little whatever you want to call it, from time to time, because all this close proximity to one another, is certainly fuel that can be used in the wrong way. So I want to move on to just just some closing remarks. I received an email from our Jeannie Adwani, who used to be a very active part of our community. Received this email from her the other day, and she said, and this is a quote, "I live in the eternal prayer that all this brings humanity closer to the heart, and that there is a huge paradigm shift, that many will embrace this new shift and this new earth." And so it raises the question now, as we've had these opportunities for introspection and deeper meditations perhaps, and deeper reminders of who we are, How will we choose to be as we gradually resume our former activities? Have we learned anything from this experience? And will it last? Perhaps you've had the past experience, as I have, of being at a meditation retreat and, you know, having that time to go within and be at peace and open your heart, and you re-enter daily life. And at first, that open-heartedness remains. And everything is beautiful and joyful, and you remember, and you have equanimity and peace. But then gradually, little by little, it starts to fade, and we find ourselves back into some habitual patterns that we had hoped not to pick back up. And there we are, caught again. And so the question is, when that time comes, as we gradually or fully immerse ourselves back in the world, what are we going to do? You know, let's keep it. Let's keep the teachings that we've learned. Let's be vigilant, truly vigilant for that new world and how we might be and how we might serve. And so we're being called, I would say, to be kind, to be loving, and to do that in whatever small ways we can. That we're to give from our hearts in the fullest. And so we've got to bring the lessons we've learned back into the world and share them with one another, remind one another, and ask ourselves, what do I want and what do I need to take back and make a difference? How may I use the gifts that I've been given through this experience to be of service to others? And I listened to a really wonderful interview that Jack Kefkin sent to all of us on the Yahoo group that featured Benji Wertheimer. Benji Wertheimer is of the Shantala group, the Kirtan group that we have hosted here at Interfaith several times in the past. And he said, he quoted some things from the Bhagavad Gita and about action and giving and the fruits of our actions. And he said, we own what we're able to give. We own that, but we don't own the fruits. The fruits that result from what we give. And, you know, in the Bhagavad Gita, it talks about an action has a result. We're called to do the action that we are meant to do, that is given us from God. You know, it comes through us. We have an action, we have particular gifts or talents, and we're being asked to bring that to the world and take an action. But we're not being asked to have conditions upon the results or expectations or gratitude expressed to us. We're simply to act with love and kindness and, you know, just greatness, and let it be. And the actions, the results, the fruits will of themselves be what they are. And so, given that we all do have our unique gifts, and that the world needs us and needs love more than ever, how are we going to do that when we rejoin and have an opportunity to make our voice be heard in the way that suits us, that in our own unique ways? And so hopefully we've all been able to feel loved and be more connected to ourselves and gather strength, and will in fact be able to rejoin the world and make a true difference. And so with that I will say namaste and open the mics.